What if I told you that Hollywood's golden age was not just about glamour, romance, and dazzling stars, but also about box office titans that rewrote the history of cinema? Some movies did not simply entertain, they built the very foundation of the industry we know today. They shattered financial records, attracted millions into theaters, and stayed alive in popular culture for decades. In this journey, we're counting down the top 15 highest-grossing movies of old Hollywood. Each film we cover isn't just a movie. It's a landmark, a revolution, a cultural phenomenon. So, let's step back in time, into the days of black and white frames, widescreen revolutions, biblical epics, and musicals that shook the world. 15. The Bells of St. Mary's, 1945. We begin our journey in 1945 with a film that touched the hearts of a post-war generation, The Bells of St. Mary's. Starring Bing Crosby and Ingrid Bergman, this gentle yet powerful drama followed a kind priest and a compassionate nun who joined forces to save a struggling school. On the surface, it sounds simple, but for millions of viewers recovering from the trauma of World War II, it was so much more than just a story. This movie represented hope, healing, and faith in a better tomorrow. It struck a deep chord with audiences who longed for reassurance in uncertain times. And financially, it was a juggernaut, grossing over $21 million in the mid-1940s, an era when tickets cost just a few cents. The numbers were staggering. But beyond numbers, let's talk impact. Bing Crosby, already America's most beloved crooner, gave the role a warmth that audiences trusted. And Ingrid Bergman, with her angelic presence, embodied grace on screen. Together, they created cinematic magic. Critics adored it, families adored it, and theaters kept it running for months. In fact, The Bells of St. Mary's became RKO Pictures' most successful film at the box office. It proved something vital. Even in times of hardship, audiences sought not just escapism, but also comfort. And Hollywood delivered both. 14. The Big Parade, 1925. Now let's rewind 20 years earlier to 1925 to the silent era. An era before synchronized dialogue, before soundtracks, before the world fully understood what movies could do. Enter King Vidor's masterpiece, The Big Parade. This was no ordinary silent film. It was an epic, raw, emotional, and ahead of its time. The story followed John Gilbert, one of the era's most beloved leading men, as an American soldier swept into the horrors of World War I. Audiences gasped at its realism. The mud, the trenches, the brutality of battle, things people had lived through less than a decade earlier, were recreated on screen with shocking authenticity. But just as powerful was the romance between Gilbert and Renée Adoré, a French farm girl. Their bittersweet love story captured the emotional toll of war in a way that words never could. Financially, The Big Parade was a sensation. It earned nearly $22 million worldwide, which, adjusted for inflation, would be the equivalent of hundreds of millions today. It was MGM's crown jewel and one of the first films to prove that cinema could compete with literature and theater in cultural significance. And beyond the money, it left behind a legacy. Future war films like All Quiet on the Western Front and even modern epics owe their DNA to The Big Parade. It was Hollywood learning, for the first time, that audiences would pay not just for entertainment, but for art that reflected their own lives and struggles. 13. Sergeant York, 1941. Fast forward to 1941. America stood at the edge of World War II, uncertain about its role on the global stage. And then came Howard Hawks' Sergeant York. Starring Gary Cooper in what many consider the performance of his career, the film told the true story of Alvin C. York, a Tennessee farm boy turned reluctant war hero. York was a man of faith, hesitant to fight, but when called upon, he became one of the most decorated American soldiers of World War I. The timing of the film's release was everything. Premiered just months before Pearl Harbor. And when America entered the war, Sergeant York became more than just a movie. It became a symbol. Theaters were packed with audiences who found inspiration in York's journey from simple country boy to national hero. It reassured Americans that ordinary citizens could rise to extraordinary challenges. Financially, the movie soared, earning over $24 million at the box office. Gary Cooper's heartfelt portrayal not only won him an Academy Award but also solidified his status as one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. More than that, Sergeant York was used as a morale booster. Schools showed it, military training camps showed it, and even the government quietly applauded it for stirring patriotism. This was cinema working hand in hand with history. 12. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. Now let's step into the land of fairy tales, where dwarfs whistled while they worked, an evil queen peered into her mirror, and a princess waited for true love's kiss. In 1937, Walt Disney took a gamble so bold that many in Hollywood thought it would ruin him. An entire feature-length animated film? No one, they said, will sit through a 90-minute cartoon. They called it Disney's Folly. But Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs didn't just prove them wrong. It made history. When audiences first saw Snow White come to life in rich Technicolor, when they laughed with Dopey and sneezed with Sneezy, when they shivered at the evil queen's transformation, they were witnessing a revolution. Financially, the film grossed more than $28 million during its initial release, an astronomical number for the 1930s. But what's even more staggering is its long-term impact. With multiple re-releases, its total earnings skyrocketed into the hundreds of millions. More importantly, it launched Walt Disney into a new stratosphere. It showed that animation was not just children's fluff, but a true art form. It laid the foundation for an empire, one that would later bring us Cinderella, The Lion King, and eventually an entire theme park kingdom. Snow White is not just one of the highest-grossing films of old Hollywood. It is, without question, one of the most important films ever made. 11. Around the World in 80 Days, 1956. At number 11, adventure takes the spotlight with Around the World in 80 Days. Based on Jules Verne's timeless novel, the film was a grand spectacle, starring David Niven as Phileas Fogg, a wealthy Englishman who wagers he can circumnavigate the globe in just 80 days. Accompanied by his loyal servant, Passepartout, played by Cantinflas, the film whisked audiences from one exotic locale to another. But what made it truly dazzling was its ambition. Dozens of international locations, massive sets, and an ensemble cast that included cameo appearances from Hollywood royalty like Frank Sinatra, Marlene Dietrich, and Buster Keaton. It was a true event movie. Financially, it was a blockbuster grossing over $42 million, one of the biggest hits of the 1950s. It also swept awards season, winning 5 Academy Awards, including the coveted Best Picture. For audiences, it wasn't just a film. It was a passport to adventure, an escape from everyday life into a whirlwind of spectacle and fun. In many ways, it was the ancestor of today's globe-trotting blockbusters, proving once again that Hollywood knew how to dream big and profit even bigger. 10. The Greatest Show on Earth, 1952. By the early 1950s, television had begun creeping into American homes. Hollywood felt threatened. Why would families pay for movie tickets when they could sit in their living rooms and watch TV for free? The answer, Hollywood decided, was spectacle. Something so enormous, so dazzling, so breathtaking, that television could never compete. And no one understood spectacle better than Cecil B. DeMille. His film The Greatest Show on Earth was Hollywood's answer to television. A 2.5-hour extravaganza set under the big top, starring Charlton Heston as the no-nonsense circus manager, Betty Hutton as the daring trapeze artist, Cornel Wilde as her rival, and James Stewart in a haunting performance as a clown with a secret. The film was an emotional roller coaster wrapped in the glitter of circus life. Audiences didn't just watch The Greatest Show on Earth. They experienced it. There were death-defying stunts, massive crowd scenes, animal stampedes, and, of course, a jaw-dropping train crash sequence that left audiences gasping. The gamble paid off. The movie earned over $46 million, making it one of Paramount's biggest hits ever. And if that weren't enough, it went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture, beating out classics like High Noon and The Quiet Man. DeMille had proved a point. Television might provide convenience, but Hollywood could provide wonder. And wonder was worth paying for. 9. From Here to Eternity, 1953. At number 9 comes one of the most celebrated dramas of old Hollywood, From Here to Eternity. Set in Hawaii just before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the film weaved together multiple storylines of soldiers struggling with love, duty, and personal demons. Burt Lancaster, Deborah Kerr, Montgomery Clift, Donna Reed, and Frank Sinatra created a powerhouse ensemble. It wasn't just the story that captivated audiences. It was the passion. The film's most famous scene, where Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr share a fiery kiss as waves crash over them on the beach, became one of the most iconic images in cinematic history. But beyond the romance, the film tackled themes of military injustice, human weakness, and resilience. Audiences were moved by its honesty, and critics hailed it as a masterpiece. Financially, From Here to Eternity was a smash, earning more than $47 million at the box office. But its triumph extended beyond money. It swept the Academy Awards, winning 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actor for Frank Sinatra, whose career was revived by this very role. For Hollywood, this was proof that intelligent, character-driven drama could be as profitable as grand spectacle. For audiences, it was a reminder that the human heart was as gripping as any battlefield. 8. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. Number 8 takes us deep into the jungles of Southeast Asia, with one of the greatest war epics ever made, David Lean's The Bridge on the River Kwai. The story followed British prisoners of war forced by their Japanese captors to build a railway bridge. Alec Guinness delivered a legendary performance as Colonel Nicholson, a man torn between duty, pride, and the moral cost of collaboration. William Holden brought Hollywood charm as the American escapee who becomes central to the bridge's fate. The film wasn't just war drama. It was a psychological study of obsession, honor, and madness. And when audiences first heard the soldiers whistle the now famous Colonel Bogey March, they knew they were watching something unforgettable. Financially, the movie was enormous, grossing over $50 million worldwide. Critically, it swept the 1958 Academy Awards, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. More than money or awards, though, The Bridge on the River Kwai was proof of Hollywood's growing ambition. Films weren't just entertainment anymore, they were global cultural events. 7. Ben-Hur, 1959. Few films define the word epic like Ben-Hur. Released in 1959, this was MGM's answer to declining profits and television competition. And what an answer it was. With Charlton Heston in the title role, Ben-Hur told the story of a Jewish prince betrayed by a friend, condemned to slavery, and ultimately seeking both revenge and redemption. But what really blew audiences away was the spectacle. The chariot race remains, to this day, one of the most breathtaking action sequences ever filmed. No CGI, no digital trickery. Just real horses, real stunts, and cameras capturing danger in its purest form. Audiences flocked to see it again and again. The film grossed nearly $74 million in the US alone, an astronomical figure for the time. Globally, its earnings soared even higher, saving MGM from bankruptcy. And then came the Oscars. Ben-Hur won 11 Academy Awards, a record that stood for decades until only Titanic and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King matched it. Ben-Hur was more than a film. It was Hollywood proving it could outdo itself, that the bigger the risk, the greater the reward. 6. The Ten Commandments, 1956. At number 6, we return once more to the master of biblical spectacle, Cecil B. DeMille, with the Ten Commandments. Charlton Heston starred again, this time as Moses, in a film that dramatized the story of the Exodus with unmatched grandeur. Opposite him was Yul Brynner as Pharaoh, commanding every scene with charisma and menace. The production itself was monumental. Thousands of extras, massive sets in Egypt and Hollywood, and special effects that, for their time, were revolutionary. The parting of the Red Sea became one of the most iconic visual moments in cinematic history. Audiences were awestruck. The film grossed an astonishing $85 million at the box office, making it one of the most successful movies of the entire 1950s. And its cultural impact? Immense. Even today, The Ten Commandments is broadcast annually on television during Easter and Passover, keeping its legacy alive for new generations. DeMille, who began making silent films in the 1910s, had capped his career with a masterpiece. A film that proved Hollywood's love for spectacle could still move audiences to tears. 5. The Robe, 1953. At number 5 comes a film that wasn't just a box office triumph, but also a technological milestone in Hollywood history. The Robe, released in 1953, was the very first motion picture ever filmed in CinemaScope, a revolutionary widescreen format that transformed the movie-going experience. The story, based on Lloyd C. Douglas's best-selling novel, followed the Roman tribune Marcellus Gallio, played by Richard Burton, who oversees the crucifixion of Christ. His life takes a dramatic turn when he wins Christ's robe in a game of chance, and is haunted by it ever after. Audiences were not only mesmerized by the powerful biblical story but also by the sheer spectacle of CinemaScope. For the first time, the silver screen stretched wider than ever before, immersing audiences in a grander, more vivid experience than television could ever deliver. The gamble paid off. The Robe earned over $36 million domestically, which translated into more than $90 million worldwide. It became one of the highest earners of its decade and cemented widescreen as the new industry standard. More than just numbers, though, The Robe represented a moment of rebirth for Hollywood. Facing the threat of television, studios had discovered a way to lure audiences back into theaters with a promise. You can't get this at home. It worked, and it changed the industry forever. 4. Samson and Delilah, 1949. At number 4, we find ourselves in the biblical world again, this time with Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah. Released in 1949, this was the film that set the stage for the biblical epics of the 1950s. Victor Mature starred as Samson, the legendary strongman, while Hedy Lamarr portrayed Delilah, the woman whose betrayal would bring him down. With George Sanders and Angela Lansbury rounding out the cast, it was a heady mix of romance, betrayal, and divine vengeance. The film dazzled audiences with lavish sets, bold costumes, and jaw-dropping sequences. Most famously, Samson toppling the Philistine temple in a finale that left audiences stunned. Financially, it was a monster hit, grossing $28 million in the US alone and far more internationally. Samson and Delilah became the highest-grossing film of 1950. It also won 2 Academy Awards for art direction and costume design. But its true legacy lies in what it inspired. The enormous success of Samson and Delilah gave Hollywood the confidence to invest in even bigger biblical spectacles. Without it, we might never have gotten the 10 Commandments or Ben-Hur. This was DeMille proving once again that faith, spectacle, and Hollywood showmanship could make box office magic. 3. Gone with the Wind, 1939. Now we enter the top 3, and at number 3 stands perhaps the most legendary film of them all, Gone with the Wind. Released in 1939, this Civil War epic wasn't just a movie, it was an event. Adapted from Margaret Mitchell's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, the film starred Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara and Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. Their fiery romance, set against the backdrop of a nation torn apart, captivated audiences like nothing before. The film's scale was unprecedented. Sprawling battle scenes, burning cities, and opulent southern mansions, all brought to life in glorious Technicolor. Audiences were stunned. Many returned to theaters multiple times, unable to get enough of Scarlett's ambition and Rhett's charm. At the box office, Gone with the Wind was an absolute juggernaut. It grossed nearly $189 million worldwide during its original run, a figure that, when adjusted for inflation, still makes it the highest-grossing movie in cinema history. Critically, it was just as dominant, winning 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Actress for Vivien Leigh, and Best Director for Victor Fleming. More than just numbers and trophies, though, Gone with the Wind became a part of American culture. Its lines, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," became immortal. Its characters became icons. And its legacy, for better and worse, continues to spark discussion about race, history, and Hollywood itself. Even today, Gone with the Wind remains one of the greatest achievements in filmmaking, both a box office titan and a cultural lightning rod. 2. The Sound of Music, 1965. At number 2, we find a film that filled theaters with music, laughter, and joy, The Sound of Music. Released in 1965, this Rodgers and Hammerstein adaptation starred Julie Andrews as Maria, a free-spirited governess who brings light and love into the lives of the 7 Vaughn trapped children, and into the heart of their stern father, played by Christopher Plummer. Set against the breathtaking scenery of Austria and shadowed by the looming threat of the Nazi regime, the film balanced sweetness with seriousness. Audiences swooned over songs like Do Re Mi, My Favorite Things, and Edelweiss. Families sang along, children begged to see it again, and critics praised Andrews' luminous performance. Financially, The Sound of Music was staggering. It grossed over $286 million worldwide, an astronomical figure for the 1960s. For years, it held the title of the highest-grossing film of all time until it was overtaken by The Godfather. It also swept awards season, winning 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And its cultural impact has been nothing short of extraordinary. More than half a century later, the songs of The Sound of Music remain embedded in popular culture, and the film continues to enchant new generations. For old Hollywood, The Sound of Music was proof that musicals, when done with heart and vision, could be as financially dominant as any epic or war film. 1. Dr. Zhivago, 1965. And finally, at number 1, we arrive at a film that combines sweeping history with intimate romance, David Lean's Dr. Zhivago. Released in 1965, this adaptation of Boris Pasternak's novel starred Omar Sharif as Yuri Zhivago, a physician and poet caught in the turmoil of the Russian Revolution. Julie Christie starred as Lara, the woman he loves, in a tale that spanned decades, revolutions, and heartbreak. What made Dr. Zhivago extraordinary was its scope. Lean, already famous for The Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia, brought his mastery of visual storytelling to bear once again. Snow-covered landscapes, sweeping train journeys, and intimate close-ups of human longing created a film both epic and deeply personal. Audiences were enthralled. The movie grossed an astonishing $320 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film of old Hollywood and one of the most successful films of all time. Its haunting score, particularly Lara's theme, became instantly recognizable and remains one of cinema's most iconic pieces of music. The film also won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Cinematography and Best Adapted Screenplay. But perhaps its greatest achievement was emotional. Dr. Zhivago made audiences feel history in their bones and love in their hearts. It showed that even amidst revolution and chaos, human passion endures. And there we have it, the countdown is complete. From The Bells of St. Mary's to Dr. Zhivago, these 15 films weren't just box office champions. They were cultural milestones. They proved that cinema could inspire, comfort, dazzle, and unite millions. They shaped Hollywood, influenced generations of filmmakers, and continue to echo through time. These are the giants on whose shoulders modern cinema stands. If you've enjoyed this journey through Hollywood's golden past, don't forget to subscribe to Golden Age Echoes, where the legends still steal the spotlight.